I don't think I've needed a new Jackbox pack in my life more than right now. And after the last couple of years, 11 is a breath of fresh air because this is easily one of their best packs, at least in terms of value proposition. This is the first pack without a sequel, believe it or not, which, as someone who buys every pack and has had mixed thoughts on many of the sequel games anyway, I think that was a great decision from my own consumer perspective. From a promotional standpoint, I'm not sure. You would think that advertising a sequel to an already established favorite would be great for marketing, but ultimately I'm not the one at the analytics. I do know that people are willing to buy the entirety of Pack 6 for Trivia Murder Party 2, so without a familiar name, Pack 11 needs to prove it's strong enough on its own merits. Does it? Well, let's see what we got. Doominate. Up to 8 players. Doominate is our fill-in-the-blank Quiplash style game we see in every pack. This time, almost literally. You take one look at it and it's like, yup, that's Quiplash. Which, hey, not necessarily a bad thing. Quiplash is a proven formula after all, and Doominate banks off that familiarity. The idea with Doominate is that you'll be sent something positive like, using the example they give, a big bowl of spaghetti. Then you gotta follow that up with something bad like, that is made up of human hair. You enter something like that, or anything else you think would quote-unquote ruin it. Your ruin goes up against another player who also got that same prompt, and in classic Quiplash fashion, everyone else votes for who gave the better answer. Or in this case, who ruined it better. Or worse. Round 2 is the same idea, except you write something else for someone else to ruin. Something like Psylocke Hawk's Pack 11 review, which was ruined with, he spends half the video yapping about Super Circuit Retro Okay, I see you. I voted for it. For the final round, you take a prompt from one of the previous rounds and are then asked to unruin it. Like someone unruined the prompt about my Pack 11 review by stating that the other half would be a review of Minecraft. Released in 2011, Minecraft sees you playing as the iconic Jack Black as you explore procedurally generated worlds filled with friends and foes. When you drop into a new world, your first goal is to break. General consensus seems to be that people think that the third round is the weakest, so Pain and Misfortune is just like inherently funny to I think just about anyone. That style of humor is pretty universal, which is why I think Doominate's round 1 and 2 format feels so natural to your average person. Positivity, clearly more subjective. In such a cynical world, I think that positivity is funny almost because of how abnormal it seems. The bait and switch of something that you thought was going to be hurtful ending up being encouraging is funny to me just because of how unexpected and forced it can feel. But again, that style of comedy is clearly much more subjective, and I would wager that's why the final round does have its detractors. At the same time though, this is a fill-in-the-blank game and there's nothing stopping you from filling in that blank with whatever you want. Playing with some friends, we had a prompt that was like, your family is cheering at your graduation, which was ruined in the previous round with, but you're deaf, so it doesn't matter. But then I think one of my friends didn't get the memo or something, so he just ruined it further with, and you're an orphan, so no one is there. Like, Jesus, man, that's horrible. And also extremely funny, which is why I voted for it. Point is, the final round is only as restrictive as you make it. If you don't think that turning a negative into a positive is funny, then there's really no reason you have to abide by that guideline when ultimately, the point of the game is to make your friends laugh. While the theme of Doominate might be the art of ruining things, its actual foundation is that it's a game where you're building off the thing before it. If you feel confined by a suggestion, then do something else. After all, my friend ruining that death prompt even further is what ended up winning that matchup. Overall, I like Doominate. However, the biggest problem as I see it is that it is extremely derivative of Quiplash, which again isn't inherently a problem on its own. I mean, it basically stealing the Quiplash formula is why the game has such a strong foundation to begin with. But when you're a game that's this derivative, you need to be the best of the best in its subgenre in order to justify playing this over something like Quiplash. Doominate gets close, but there's a few things that keep it from being the best of the best. First of all, 8 players. 8 might be the Quiplash standard, but Job accommodating 10 is one of the biggest reasons that it gets played over Quiplash in a lot of my circles. This is something you'll be hearing again since not a single game in Pack 11 supports more than 8 people. It seems like the Jackbox team is under the assumption that the higher the player count, the worse the pacing will be, which isn't always untrue, but there's more factors to a game's length beyond just number of people playing. A game like Pole Mine, for instance, doesn't take that much longer with 10 players than it does with 5 or 6. Survey Scramble is another example of a Jackbox game where the duration is barely affected by the number of people playing, ignoring the game mode dares, I guess, but that's a whole other can of worms. In their defense, in a fill-in-the-blank game like Doominate, the number of prompts is directly tied to the number of people playing, so it is fair to say that the higher player counts do make these types of games take longer, but it's a compromise that I think most of us are willing to make, especially since not only is Doominate a similar length to a 10-player game of Job, roughly 25 minutes, but compared to an 8-player game of Quiplash, which has the same amount of rounds, mind you, Doominate is 6 to 8 minutes longer based on my own recording. things. That's nuts. I think the culprit here is the transitions. In Quiplash, you have the host read the prompt, it moves up, and then the two answers appear. Quick, snappy, no fluff. In Doominate, you hear this angel choir anytime a prompt rolls in, then the prompt goes away, then the prompt is shown again to show the two answers, then for whatever reason it takes a weirdly long time to divvy out the votes and move on to the next joke. A full 15 seconds for every single prompt once that final vote is submitted. That might not sound long, but watch it for yourself and you'll probably see where I'm coming from. This is compounded even further in the final round where, again, you got the angel choir, the prompt rolls in, goes away, is shown again, reveals the previous ruin that was also already shown, then shows the unruin for every single prompt. Hearing that angel choir each and every time gets old pretty quickly as well. The other big critique for Doominate is that the scoring is just like This was already a bit of a problem in Quiplash, but I think Doominate is the most busted it's ever been. In Quiplash 3, for comparison, the max score you could get for every round was 2,000, 4,000, and then 3,000 on the final round. A single prompt giving you 3k was nuts, but it was still less than the total score you could accumulate during round 2. In Doominate, every round has 2 prompts, so it goes 2k, 4k, and then 6k, only being able to get a third of the amount of points on round 1 as you can make on the final round is crazy, and it makes round 1 feel very insignificant in the grand scheme of things. There's some other minor critiques like the ruin for me button. This game's equivalent to the safety quip, just fills your blank in with an answer without any sort of penalty. You can even erase or edit it, so there's essentially no reason to not at least check what it'll give you. And also, only 8 avatars. Come on, it wouldn't be that hard to make a few more. I'll do it right now. Almost as a rule, I think if a game lets you pick an avatar, the number available should exceed the player cap IMO. I don't want any of this to come off as if I hate Doominate or something, because the reality is that Doominate is an extremely solid Quiplash clone, but given how derivative it is, I think it's only natural to hold it up to its peers. As a standalone title, Doominate is a great comedy game with a fantastic host, by the way. This skeleton with a fanny pack, Jim Reaper, might be one of the best hosts ever. With a few minor tweaks, this could really be an all-time classic, but even as it currently is, Doominate is still definitely worth your time and is a great lead into the rest of the pack. Hearsay. You think I would have learned by now to not judge Jackbox games before they come out. These aren't like other games where it's easy to get a general idea of how everything will play out just by watching some gameplay, since the gameplay in a Jackbox game is more or less the experience you're having outside the screen. Well, that, and also Jackbox is typically vague as hell when it comes to their upcoming games. So when Hearsay was revealed as a game where you just vote on who made the dumbest sounds, in the very first bit of footage in the reveal trailer was this. I was like, yeah, there's no way. I hope the other games in the pack are solid because this is going to be the guaranteed dud. Well, joke's on me because not only is Hearsay good, but it ended up being the favorite of the pack among multiple different friend groups. So you and up to 7 other friends, by the way, another 8-player game with only 8 avatars, feels bad, man, are given a prompt like the sound you would make if someone poked you really hard. And then I'll do your best to do an impression of, well, that. During the initial audio replay, most of the comedy basically just comes from knowing how uncomfortable you and your friends are hearing each other make crude and awkward noises. And that part is fine. Mileage will vary, of course. But if that was all the game was, then Hearsay wouldn't amount to much. The real genius of Hearsay is that after everyone votes for whose recording they like the most, the winning audio is applied to an accompanying video clip. This is where the heart of the game lies. The intrigue of seeing how the game will apply your dumb sound your friend made to some random stock footage is surprisingly what makes the entire experience what it is.
In and out, it's mid, and you all know it.
It's very often mindless humor that understandably isn't going to appeal to people who enjoy their comedy to be a little more thought out, but I cannot deny how much Hearsay made nearly every group I played with laugh.
Yeah, I think my most attractive quality is that I'm bronze in League.
The video segment is a bit of a double-edged sword because it seems the team also understood that it really is the core of the experience. So much to the point where many of these prompts feel like they're little more than just setups for an upcoming clip, and as a result, don't make for particularly strong voting rounds. Something like the sound of a breeze gently flowing through the trees is such an oddly specific and restrictive prompt. It seems clear that the priority was aiding a specified clip, opposed to creating a prompt that's solid on its own merits. When it comes to the actual voting portion, the game's best prompts are the ones that are open-ended, like something the captain of the Titanic might have said.
No, but it's made of water, right? so we're fine.
In the cut hearsay, a little bit of slack. I do think that the better, more open-ended prompts account for the bigger majority of the game's prompts. Two sort of big things I should mention though. One, this game doesn't seem to have that many prompts. I have heard that there's less than 100, which can't possibly be right because that's crazy low. Although I can speak from my own experience, and my own experience is that I've seen many of these clips multiple times. Which, you know, not always a problem since each clip will typically have multiple different prompts associated with it. There's some duds like the party blowers or that one with a moose, which I don't think I've ever found particularly funny regardless of what prompt is associated with it. But there are also clips like the one with the cow getting abducted, which I think I've laughed at every time regardless of the audio.
I got some eye rolls.
But even with something like the stock footage of the cow getting abducted, it's a little disappointing when you get a prompt and you already know exactly what video clip it's going to be used for because the total pool of videos is so limited. And number two, perhaps an even bigger problem than number one, depending on how you typically play Jackbox, is that this just might be the first Jackbox game that just cannot be played in person all too well. Owners of Pack 11, myself included, have been playing this Among Us style. You know, the whole hop on Discord, mute yourself when you're recording audio, then unmute during playback, and that works well. But in person, especially if you're playing in the same room, your phone is just going to pick up the people next to you, the jokes are going to get spoiled because people would have heard your response before the playback, and it's just going to be hard to focus when everyone around you is screaming. I mean, I refer back to the official trailer for this game. I think it speaks for itself. I did play this with my two roommates, and even with us being in separate rooms, the comedy was sort of ruined because, muffled or not, I heard what they were recording in advance, which definitely ruined the shock value element. So that's definitely a limitation of a game like this, but as long as you play it with friends online, this is still a great time. And it's quick. This is seriously like a 12-minute game, so the pacing is pretty good. Oh, I mean, as long as you turn off the intermissions. I should probably mention these. Okay, so basically by default, you have these little sound mini games in between each round that can get you some extra points. They're called warm-ups, so I guess that's the idea behind them, but they're all volume based and none of them are particularly fun. The first one, you just make a repetitive sound over and over. The second one is a snake where its height is dictated by the decibel level and you have to eat all the dots. And then the last one, you gotta get these chattering teeth to jump over the hills. I originally thought it would have you do light noises for small bumps and then loud noises for the taller hills, but no. If you just keep a continuous loud tone, it will jump over every hill as it comes. A cute addition, but none of the groups I played with really cared for these. They're not all too fun and they make the game longer than it really needs to be. But fair is fair, you can turn them off. So I don't think there's any harm in them being here as long as they're optional. I don't want to come off as too negative here because, as I said at the start, Hearsay ended up becoming a new favorite among many of my friends. And when you hold Hearsay up to the team's full catalog of games, it's easily one of their most unique. If nothing else, it is by far the most unique game in Pack 11, and I don't even think it's close. The online limitation is a bit of a disappointment given the normal spirit of these titles, but otherwise Hearsay provides a quick, surprisingly funny experience that ends up being distinctly its own. While I can see this not jibing with every friend group, it's still a risk I'm glad the team took, and if my friends have anything to say about it, this is definitely something I'm going to be booting up again in the future.
Hi, this is Brian. You know how to do it.
Cookie House, standing in as our drawing game of the pack, although it wouldn't be inaccurate to instead describe this as a decorating game. Cookie House sees up to 8 players decorating cookies to satisfy strange requests like, make a cookie that represents something from Italy. Each player gets 3 different cookie shapes to choose from. 2 of them will be labeled challenge shapes that give you extra points for choosing them as your base, and once you choose one, it's time to draw, or decorate. The drawing tools are definitely the strangest, albeit the most in-depth we've seen in a drawing game so far. You got a wide range of colors to choose from, 3 brush sizes, and several types of sprinkles you can spread all over if you're so inclined. Something to note is that these aren't just flat colors like the other titles. There's both a bevel and a glare effect masked over the frosting to give it added depth, making it actually look like a photorealistic cookie. It's super cool and looks great, but holy smokes is it laggy. It works okay on my desktop, but on my phone, like forget it, there's way too much latency. It requests that you use hardware acceleration or something along those lines, so some of my friends couldn't even use it on the preferred web browser and had to switch to another. I don't know if this is anything that can be fixed, and I don't want to harp on it too much because it's technically not even a problem with the game's design, it's more so a limitation of the application. But if your phone struggled to run something like Dodo Re Mi, then this one unfortunately struggles even more. Quick update, as this review took me so long to make. They have since updated this game, adding a low fidelity mode that removes all the post-processing effects, instead leaving you with basic flat colors just like any other Jackbox game. This runs much faster on slower devices. And the smartest thing about this edition is that it's a toggle, so you can draw something in low fidelity, then switch to high fidelity to see how it it looks. Kudos, Jackbox team. That aside, once you finish your cookie, you give it a name, then you move on to voting, where 2 cookies will face off head-to-head, with all the other players voting for which one they prefer. Votes equate to points as usual, but unlike usual, there are a lot of little extra bonuses given for a huge variety of miscellaneous things. Finish the cookie fast? That's a bonus. Give a like to a cookie you're competing against? That's also a bonus. And it shows your total score breakdown afterwards with this whole receipt motif. Super charming and cool. Rounds 2 and 3 are more the same, albeit round 3 will always be this bird customer that's receiving an order over the phone, having you fill in the blank of what they couldn't hear the customer say. A cute touch, but again, the round itself is otherwise the same. The final round, however, has the customer of the first round come in who is now unhappy of the cookies you gave them and gives them back to you to redecorate. What this means in terms of gameplay is that you got 3 of the winning cookies that you and your friend submitted on round 1 and now need to rework them into something else. I'm pretty sure I forgot to mention this during my review of TKO 2, but that game actually did the same thing. I wasn't a huge fan of it there, and I think it makes even less sense here. There's no eraser or anything, so you're sort of just making superfluous additions to a submission that was already fine. It's recycling a joke, which gives players an early idea of what they can expect, taking away from the shock value. Whether or not the original art will even lend itself well to further alterations is extremely hit or miss. And honestly, it's just hard to make it not look like a deranged mess, especially in this game with the layering system. In Cookie House, if you draw over the art that's already on the cookie, it will basically leave indentations of the original art underneath. Great attention to detail, but it looks pretty bad. And that attention to detail specifically only leaves you wondering why redecorating an old cookie was chosen as the final round in the first place. Don't get me wrong, there have definitely been times where the previous cookies lent themselves to extra additions so well that the contrast between the original art and what it turned into led to some good laughs. But not only would I say that's generally the exception rather than the rule, it's just not really in line with a bakery theming. Returning an item to a store is more of like a retail thing. It doesn't make that much sense for a bakery, even with the context they try to give it. Taking a cue from their past game, Junktopia, I think a more appropriate final round could have seen players choosing 3 cookies from the previous rounds to make their own themed box with a name they provide. Like this box right here. If someone chose these 3 cookies for their box, they could have called it something like the Airport Experience box. It would be more in line with the bakery theme, and it would even lend itself super well to the receipt breakdown with various things providing bonus points. You could get points for player votes, points for every box that included a cookie you made, etc. Plus, 4 rounds of drawing? 4 rounds is a lot. By the time I make it to round 4, I'm basically done drawing. So choreographing your own box instead of another drawing round would not only be a nice break, but it would also be a great mix-up to conclude the game. My own suggestions aside, after everyone votes for the final cookies, scores are tallied up, and a winner is declared. Cookie House is a great drawing game that is unfortunately slightly held back by a lot of little things. There's the device slowdown I mentioned earlier, but then there's bizarre choices like only having a single undo or not being able to go back to drawing once you start naming your cookie. For real, once you decide to name your cookie, you're locked in, which means unlike something like Champed Up, you can't name it in advance and then use the rest of the time to draw. This one is also such a nothing complaint, but why does the host freak out saying you're running out of time when you got a whole minute left?
Boy, cutting it close, huh?
An entire minute is not cutting it close. Could you cool your jets, ma'am? These things are hardly enough to ruin the experience, however. Again, Cookie House is a solid drawing game. The theming is charming, it's shockingly fast-paced. Even with 4 rounds, this is actually one of the shorter drawing games, generally clocking in shy of 20 minutes. So much to the point that if any game should have been 10-player, it really should have been Cookie House, since voting rounds are super quick, and adding 2 more people would really just mean 1 more head-to-head per round, which wouldn't add that much additional time. But despite the nitpicks, Cookie House is a fun and quirky drawing game, and with drawing tools so atypical, it might even appeal to those who generally don't even like drawing games. Definitely a worthy addition to the pack. Suspectives. 4 to 8 players, Suspectives is a social deduction game where one of you committed a crime, and it's up to the group to figure out who. At the start of the game, you take a questionnaire with multiple choice questions like, how do you feel about roller coasters? Are you a smooth talker? Just answer truthfully. After everyone's answers are in, the game will randomly pick one of you to be the culprit, and will gradually show each and every one of their answers one by one. In other words, the idea is to look at the results of all the questions everyone answered, and ask yourself, who in this group would have answered these questions like this? Each time another one of the culprit's answers are revealed, a random player is chosen to interrogate another player of their choosing. A fun and appropriate addition given the whole late night investigation vibe that they have here. Although how much fun you have with it is entirely up to you, since if you're trying to be efficient, most interrogations are just going to devolve into, what was your answer for this? What was your answer for that? If you don't know the people you're playing with very well, I would advise asking the questions that have not been revealed yet, since if you don't actually know someone's preferences, catching them in a lie is basically the only way you can reliably find the culprit. That's the basic gist of it, but there's 2 additional implementations used to shake things up. The first is the phony evidence. One of the answers will not be that of the culprit, but instead pulled from another player. Strangely, the culprit is not told which question question is going to be used for the phony evidence. If you're the culprit, all it tells you is which player has their answer being used in place of you, which isn't that helpful, truth be told. The other aspect here are the lie detectors. You get 2 per game regardless of the player count, and the way it works is that everyone votes for a question and then votes for a player, and then that player's answer will get revealed to everyone. If you reveal someone's answer and it does not match the answer of the culprit, that player essentially gets cleared with a little angel emote next to them for the rest of the game. For whatever reason, if you reveal a question that only had one player answer it, like what's showing on the screen, aka the culprit was the only player to answer it like that, and then pull a positive on the single person you run the lie detector on, the game keeps going? A small complaint, sure, but if you catch the criminal with a lie detector in this way, shouldn't the game just end? Might seem like a weird edge case, but catching the culprit with an answer that only they submitted when using a lie detector is something I've seen happen numerous times. Partly due to how there will often be questions of upwards to 10 different answers. Not an exaggeration, by the way, but we'll get into the RNG of the questions later. The last piece of evidence revealed is a fill in the blank. In other words, it will have an answer that is wholly unique to the criminal, and I want to stress that something like this is not helpful whatsoever if you're not familiar with certain players, but extremely damning if you do know everyone that game. I don't believe this fill in the blank can be the phony evidence, nor can it even be tested since it's revealed after the second and final lie detector. So it's either you know the people playing or you don't. Without a lie detector, you can't really catch a player in a lie if you don't know how they would respond otherwise. For what it's worth, there is a toggle to have the final question be another multiple choice, but since whatever evidence is at the top right will always be revealed after the second lie detector, even that faces a similar problem where, as the culprit, you can lie about this all you want since there's no way to fact check it in-game. There will be one last interrogation after the final answer is revealed, and then it's time for everyone to vote for who they think the culprit is. Vote correctly and the interrogators will win. Vote incorrectly and the single culprit will win. If you couldn't already gather from what I've said, Suspectives is a game that's more about how well you know your friends than it is a well-designed social deduction game. Because I'm gonna be harsh here, it's not. Don't get me wrong. Suspectives is a blast to play. One of my absolute favorites to go back to out of the entire pack. But as the culprit, there's not much strategizing you can really do. You don't know how future questions were answered, and you don't even know what question will be used for the phony evidence. And for some of these questions, there's just no lying out of them. For example, there's a question that asks you how many siblings you have, with, of course, one of the answers being that you're an only child. And if you're the single only child in that group, and your friends know that, that isn't exactly something you can just lie about. You're just f***ed. There was a game I did where one of the questions was like, of all the listed institutions, which do you have personal beef with? And my friend who ended up being the culprit answered school, and when the question was revealed, it showed us that only one person answered it like that. She hated school. It had a really bad experience in high school, and anyone who knows her even a little, which happened to be nearly everyone playing, knows that because she's very vocal about that fact. So when that got revealed, we all immediately knew it was her. There was no lying out of it. She was simply screwed because the game just happened to choose that as one of the questions. And trust me, she tried. Her partner is a teacher, so after denouncing that it wasn't her answer, she tried saying that he complains about his day at school all the time. It was probably the best lie she could have feasibly come up with on the spot, but again, it wasn't enough. And I don't necessarily think that was her fault. We used a lie detector on her, it was a positive, and since only one person answered the question like that, her, it was game then and there. The Suspectives will tell you whether or not you're the culprit for that game after all the answers are in, and all I gotta say is that if you know in advance how absolutely you will be if you're chosen to be the culprit based on the questions that you are currently answering alone, then there is something very wrong with its presence as a social deduction game. There should be more to a social deduction game than just how well do you know the group. But because you're so reliant on the RNG of the questions as the culprit, that's really all most games boil down to. How well do you know your group, and what questions does RNG decide to give you? If you get a lot of questions of 10 or so answers each, then the criminal is extra boned because it's more likely they'll give an answer that is completely unique to them. Unless the group just isn't paying attention or there's some weird happenstance, it's extremely unlikely the culprit will win if all the players know each other. The unfortunate part is that there's tons of very minor changes that could be made to make this a phenomenal social deduction game. Two basic ones that come to mind for me. One, show the culprit the results of every question on their device before they're revealed on the screen. This would let you plan out lies in advance instead of what happens now, where as the culprit, if you're interrogated early on and are asked about future questions, you just have to cross cross your fingers and hope the things you're saying aren't too damning, since you don't know how everyone else answered. Again though, just show the culprit the answer results, and that's alleviated instantly. And 2, let the culprit pick what piece of evidence will be the phony. In the example from earlier, if my friend was able to see in advance that she was the only one that answered school in that one question, she could have picked that to be the phony evidence, so that way she would have at least some chance at winning. As a final comment, I would heavily advise against playing this with smaller player counts. On an 8-player game, you have 9 pieces of evidence when including the crime, but on anything else, it's only 1 less. So if you're doing a 4-player game, you will have 8 pieces of evidence and still have 2 lie detectors. Potentially being able to confidently clear half of the players with lie detectors is absolutely insane. On top of the crime, it should really just be 1 piece of evidence per player. This many revealed answers in this small of a group is simply overkill. I think the craziest part is that even after everything I've just said, I still really enjoy Suspectives. It's a really fun game. It just isn't a great social deduction game, which yeah, obviously is a problem. I mean, really, Suspectives is more similar to one of those how well do you know your friends quizzes than it is a proper social deduction game. But I can definitely see that aspect appealing to certain groups, and at the very least, it won't stop me from continuing to boot this up in the future. Lastly, we have Legends of Trivia. Okay, so you know how with Hearsay I said I need to stop judging Jackbox games in advance because I thought it would be a dud and then it ended up becoming a group favorite? Well, that works both ways because a team's trivia games are always at least decent, right? And that's at their worst, mind you. Jackbox is really good at trivia, so when hearing they were doing a trivia game with a D&D fantasy theme, that sounds like $1 million idea. So as Pack 11 was being announced, I kinda looked at it like, okay, well at least we know one of the games will be solid. Never would I have expected this to be the weakest link of Pack 11. I'm getting ahead of myself though. Legends of Trivia, which I didn't even know until recently is supposed to be Travia.
To the realm of Trivia.
Or supposedly, they say it like that in the tutorial and nowhere else ever again. Even in the credits song, they are very clearly saying trivia. However, it's supposed to be pronounced, and it's weird to start my critiques with the title since Jackbox has had a pretty good track record when it comes to naming, but I'm not a huge fan of it. Little uninspired. It doesn't abbreviate well, and the acronym is LOT. Not as solid as YDKJ or TMP, but whatever. Just think the team is more creative is all. This is the only game in the pack that does not support 8 players, instead only supporting 6. A little disappointing and not something I think is fully justified, but honestly I think the bigger crime is that this is the 3rd game in the pack with only 8 selectable avatars. They have different stats, but it doesn't amount to much, so I wouldn't worry about it. In fact, was it not for this screen, I'm not even sure I would have noticed a difference. I probably would have just assumed that damage wasn't a finite number and had a small range like in other RPGs. They don't have any traits or abilities. The only differences are a slight variance in obtained gold, damage dealt, and health. And when I say slight, I really do mean slight. Hugely missed opportunity, honestly. The general gist, as the name would suggest, is that this is a fantasy-themed trivia game where you work as a team. A pretty basic concept that could be fleshed out with a plethora of D&D inspired supplements, such as the previously suggested character abilities. But all the D&D stuff is pretty surface level. The biggest piece of foreshadowing is the tutorial itself. It's nearly 3 minutes long, and all that it teaches you is that enemies attack you, and when your health hits 0, you roll a dice to revive. Unless we want to be generous and say it also teaches you that there are multiple choice trivia questions, the point is that these are all very obvious things that the player is going to figure out on their own by just playing. And there definitely shouldn't be so much fluff that it takes 3 minutes to communicate them to the player, especially since the less obvious stuff, like the more abstract question types, are not taught through this tutorial. And the tutorial is sort of misleading anyways, because in the actual game if you get a question wrong, you'll get hit by the enemy, but the tutorial communicates that the players who get the question wrong and players who get the question right are punished the same amount, which isn't the case. By the way, unlike other Jackbox games where if you forget to turn the tutorials off, it will still let you skip them, there is no way to skip the Legends of Trivia tutorial once it starts. Again, the tutorial is a lot of unnecessary fluff, and I'd argue it does a better job at foreshadowing the experience as a whole than it does teach you any of its mechanics, so allow me to fill in. At the start of the game, and between rounds, your team will vote on a route to take. Different routes have different question types and will always contain a non-combat interaction, such as a shop, a riddle, or a question type called List It. Shops are exactly what they sound like. You get money anytime you get the trivia right, and you can use it to buy items. You're able to hold 2, and there's stuff like usable hints on the current question, or potions to heal health. They are weirdly cheap, like so cheap that even when you're doing doing terribly. It's basically next to impossible to not have the money needed to fill both of your item slots. Because of this, money is an absolutely pointless mechanic. When you die, it does charge you money to revive, but if you're completely broke, it just lets you revive anyway. I mean, I guess the more gold you have, the higher your score will be, but it doesn't save your score anyway, so it's not like it matters. You can also sell items at the shops, but again, this is never something you'll ever need to do, and it's not like you ever collect items outside the shops anyways. In fact, even if you did, it's not unlikely you'll only encounter a single shop per game, and that's because you'll likely want to choose a route that has a riddle or a list it instead. The list it will give you a topic like legal hands in poker, something with several answers essentially, with everyone able to contribute an answer to the list. List off everything and you get gold. And riddles are exactly what they sound like. It will slowly reveal more and more hints to help you guess the word it's thinking of, and the faster you get the word, the more health you'll replenish. They can easily bring you back to full HP, and more importantly, they're fun. Not to mention, they make decent use of the team format since you can talk it out. That's in comparison to the main trivia where you'll get a question, someone will just be like, it's C, and then everyone else will just choose C. Speaking of which, if you're not in a shop, a riddle, or a list it, you're fighting an enemy. Most of the enemies follow the multiple choice format, and as stated, my problem is that it's just basic trivia with no other choices to make, and a dull application of the cooperative angle since it's really just one person telling everyone else what the answer is. Anytime you answer the trivia correctly, you attack the enemy and collect gold. Answer incorrectly and you lose health and gold. Yeah, for whatever reason, health and gold are tied together in combat. As highlighted earlier though, gold is a non-element. Again, since you can always revive even with 0 gold, you can't actually lose, which trivializes both gold and health, come to think of it. The other question types are double answer, where 2 of the 4 answers will be correct, and as long as you pick at least one of them, you'll successfully attack. Missed opportunity to have 2 separate enemies, having each correct answer target one or the other. There's the image trivia, which is probably the best question type given the format of the game. It will give you a category like fruit in Pac-Man, which by the way is wrong. It claims the orange is not in Pac-Man, but it very blatantly is. But the idea is that everyone will be provided a different image and need to vote either true or false to their specific image. Beyond it just being unique, the reason I like this category the most is that it incentivizes you to individually help everyone in your team. Player 1 might know player 2's answer, player 3 might know player 4 and 5's answer. It's cool. It takes better advantage of the team element opposed to simply telling everyone to, pick D. Then there's hidden question, which is probably my least favorite type. It's still the multiple choice format, except only one person gets the question, and every player only has 1 of 4 answers on their screen. I appreciate the attempt at a question that promotes a cooperative element, but for one, the person who has the question on their device can just throw it up on the screen, defeating the entire point of the question type. Not that having someone read the question out loud is really that different from reading it yourself anyway beyond legibility, which is why I assume they even give you the option to throw it up on the TV screen in the first place. And 2, once everyone does know the question, all of the answers are on the screen anyway, regardless of who has what. So once again, it just devolves into whoever has C, press C. Chalk this up to being a group problem, I suppose, but it's also annoying when someone in your group is not cooperating, presses their answer on their screen, only for it to be wrong, and then having everyone get punished. It's just an awkward question type that doesn't add much to the cooperative angle, is too similar to the standard multiple choice, and most importantly, is not very enjoyable. This question type also draws attention to how few enemies there are in the game. Excluding the 3 bosses, there are only 6 enemies, which I shouldn't have to elaborate on. That's ludicrously low. But even more problematic is that you'll do a hidden question trivia where only 1 player attacks per question, which will result in this much damage, right? Then you'll move on to the next enemy, who is exactly the same, except now since it's multiple choice, you're all attacking independently, and suddenly your attacks are doing this little on the same enemy? This is done for balancing purposes, of course, and if there were more enemy types, it could easily just be excused as, oh, it's a different enemy, so this one just has a different defense stat. But that just blatantly is not the case when you're fighting these same dudes back to back. I should also mention that outside of visuals, none of the enemies differ in any way. No special abilities, no different strategies you need to employ, it's all the same. The only difference I ever noticed was on the very first boss, where the questions are written in like caveman speech since he's supposed to be like a dumb ogre. You know, the whole, last week me stopped this guy who said he went to Rice. What'd he mean? It's cute, I appreciate it, but it's the only time in the whole game where an enemy actually felt different outside visuals. And even then, this is just there to add character. It's not like he's fought any differently. The second boss will visualize bombs next to the incorrect answers players submit, but they don't seem to change anything. I thought maybe they would fall on the players, so for every different wrong answer selected, the team would take more damage, but nothing like that happens. Speaking of bosses, regardless of the routes you take, your journey will always end in a boss battle. There's 1 for each stage, so 3, and for the most part, they play out in your typical multiple choice format. The biggest difference between a boss and an enemy is that when a boss's health gets low enough, the question format will change to what they call flurry of facts, which is essentially a dis or dat from You Don't Know Jack. It will give you two categories, like NBA player nickname or A24 film, then you gotta decide on whether the current thing is one or the other. I like the mix-up, and dis or dat has always been one of my favorite parts of YDKJ, so it appearing here as well is cool, but nearly everything else about how Flurry of Facts is executed is frustrating. Firstly, there's the health cap. Right here, for example, all of us get the question right, and before this point, each attack was doing about 100 damage each, right? My character lands the first attack, only does 5, then every subsequent attack does 0. Why? Because the threshold to switch over the Flurry of Facts is getting him down to 600 HP, and once that threshold is met, everything after is ignored. But why is there a threshold at all? There's few worse feelings in a video game than knowing that something that you did correctly did not matter. Flurry of Facts works on a timer, and the idea is that for every correct answer, you will knock this number down, get it down to 0, and you defeat the boss. However, if the timer hits 0 before that number does, the boss will get a bunch of their health back, and you gotta get them back to that threshold all over again. It's especially annoying when your team deals enough hits to kill the boss, but not everyone submitted in time, so it gets all its health back, only for the game to tell you that you need 0 hits left to defeat them when you get back to the Flurry of Facts segment. I've had this happen multiple times, in fact. Once you defeat the boss, it shows you the same results screen that shows any time you complete a route, and then that's it. It just goes to credits. No unique end screen, no final breakdown on what you did during the adventure, like that's it. Even on the final boss of the game, there is no final cutscene or anything. Straight to credits. What happened? My only guess is that they simply didn't have enough time to finish it or implement all the things they wanted. It's a really ambitious game on the surface, or at the very least an ambitious concept, but I do not think it succeeds at any of the core tenets it attempts. As I see it, there are 3 things that Legends of Trivia is attempting to be. A trivia game, obviously, a cooperative game, and a D&D inspired game. If it did any of these 3 things well, I would be a little disappointed, sure, but it would be enough to not write off the game completely. Let's address each of these one by one in reverse order, starting with the D&D motif. As stated at the start, the D&D stuff is laid on pretty thin. Although it might not be the first thing that comes to mind, I would argue that a huge defining component of D&D, or any RPG really, is player choice. The choices that you make shape the experience that you have, whether that be in regards to story, or just from a mechanical gameplay perspective when it comes to how you approach battles. So what choices does Legends of Trivia offer the players that wouldn't be seen in any other trivia game? Well, there's the characters, which don't have any unique abilities or traits. They have stats, but the differences are pretty negligible. You get to choose the path you go on, which is a cool touch, but there's only ever one destination, and your decision is typically just a difference of a single question type. And finally, there is a choice of different items at the shop. No cool trinkets to buy or trade. It's all surface level stuff. Heal yourself, avoid a single attack, automatically revive. It's just stuff like that. Even choices aside, other RPG inspired elements such as gold or health don't matter at all. Items are cheap enough that you can always buy anything you want, and if your health hits 0, you revive anyways. And that's it. When it comes to the D&D influence, those are the only things that set it apart from other trivia games when viewing it mechanically. Then as a cooperative game, I don't think Legends of Trivia does nearly enough to take advantage of the team angle. I would say that the best implementation of the team aspect is the image trivia for the reasons given prior. It incentivizes you to converse with your team in an actual meaningful way, opposed to just telling everyone to pick the one correct answer. Otherwise, yeah, that's what most of this game boils down to. One person knowing the answer and telling everyone else to pick it. And since the D&D stuff is so paper thin, it's not cooperative from that perspective either. There's certainly no buffing allies of spells, no team attacks, you don't have to revive each other, or basically any other cooperative elements you'd expect in a game of a fantasy theme. And finally, perhaps most importantly, this is just not a very good trivia game. I would be willing to overlook everything else if it excelled in this one area, but it doesn't. It's poorly paced, it goes on for far too long, most of the trivia is incredibly basic, and some of the stuff unique to this game, such as Hidden Question, isn't all too fun. And most damning to a trivia game, there's hardly anything here. The shelf life of most trivia games is basically however long it takes to see every question included. That's why, even if someone such as myself prefers Fibbage 3 to Fibbage 4, Fibbage 4 still justifies itself for the simple fact that it provides more trivia to those who have already seen everything in the past 3 titles. But in Legends of Trivia, there are only 3 levels. It is possible to beat the entire game in an hour. It's not even like their past games like Devils or Bomb Corp, where each level gives you an individual level score, so even if you beat it, you can still go back with the goal of improving how you did. Legends of Trivia scores you, sure, but it's not like anything saves, so there's really no point considering that there isn't even a quote-unquote winner. Speaking of Bomb Corp, that game had an endless mode. That was pretty cool, right? So even if you beat all the story levels, there was still a reason to keep playing. In a game with only 3 stages, Legends of Trivia could have really benefited from a mode like that. Not to beat this game while it's down, but I want to make brief mention of the audience support in this game. It's pretty crummy. All that the audience members can do is vote to either heal the players or heal the enemies. And since the support is so unengaging, more than likely the audience is going to vote to heal the enemies because at least they can maybe garner some enjoyment by hearing the players get annoyed. And yeah, it is annoying, but I can't necessarily blame audience members voting to do that either because having nothing else to do but roll a dice is boring. There are so many things they could have done with an audience feature in this game. Have the audience play as a familiar that answers the questions alongside the players to provide extra damage. Or hell, you could give them the role of the dungeon master deciding on which enemies or questions will appear next. Nothing but a binary decision on who to heal is so dull. It is among the weakest audience support we've seen in a Jackbox title. All of this is sad because again, this is a banger idea for a game. Jackbox is so good at trivia. It seemed like everything was lining up for this to be one of the best inclusions we've seen in a pack. I mean, really, Jackbox Trivia plus RPG elements? How could that miss? Legends of Trivia is how. It misses as a D&D inspired game, it misses as a cooperative game, and most unfortunate of all, it misses as a trivia game. And there's so little content, I would wager that even people who are more forgiving towards this title are already done with it too. There isn't any 1 or even 2 small changes that would redeem the experience. As cool as the concept is, the bottom line is that this game was too ambitious for its own good, and sadly didn't get the R&D you need for D&D. It always feels weird ending a pack review on a negative note, but that's pack 11. As critical as I've been, especially towards Legends of Trivia, pack 11 is a great value proposition, and that's easily its strongest quality. It seems rare when I like 3 games in the pack, but 4? And the games that are fun are practically proven formulas, so I can confidently say that they all have very broad appeal. Unfortunately, I think that aspect is actually pack 11's biggest drawback, at least for owners of other packs. Doominate is a great Quiplash-inspired game, but I don't think it will be replacing Quiplash or Job for my groups. Suspectives is a fun social deduction game, but if I want to play something that has a bigger emphasis on its social deduction elements, I'm gonna play Push to Button. And Cookie House is a genuinely fun drawing game, but I don't think it beats out something like TKO or Champed Up. Pack 11 plays things very safe, and to be fair, I think that was the right call after how uncertain the last 2 years have been for the series. But because the games here are nearly identical to past titles and how they play, the comparisons to their past works are almost unavoidable. When it comes to execution, without a doubt, the most unique game in the pack is Hearsay. If I had to guess, that's gonna be the one game here with the most staying power. Everything else is unfortunately 1 or 2 small changes short of being the best in their genre, and nothing in the pack supporting 10 players is also pretty rough when it comes to helping these games stand out among past Jackbox entries. But again, the value proposition here cannot just be ignored. If I were to introduce someone to Jackbox and recommend them a single pack, this would unironically be up there with packs 3 and 7 for me, which is really high praise. The Jackbox Party Pack 11 gets a 4 out of 5. 4 of the 5 games are fun to play, they're all built on proven formulas, and there is really good variety. Drawing, trivia, social deduction, and fill-in-the-blank comedy are like the core tenets of the franchise. So if you want a single pack that covers all your bases, pack 11 is the one to buy. I think it's ironic that the first party pack without a sequel ended up being one of the safest packs they ever put out. As a longtime fan, I would have preferred to see more innovation, but taking a step back and looking at pack 11 objectively, it's undeniably a solid and well-rounded pack. So if you're looking for something to play with your friends and family this holiday season, this is one that I can safely recommend. Thanks for watching, and happy holidays, guys.